people basically flatten themselves into these spaces and how they perform sorts of competitions in their presentation of sexuality and gender. So the different elements that you see here are on the interior of this space. There are paintings of male bodies that are sort of flattened in a way that's meant to mimic paper dolls, kind of. And the reason that this is shaped like a circus tent is because of what you find in the title about contortion. So the bodies of the men are kind of like dancing in a strange way, they're bending in a strange way, and they're contorted to the point that they are not even complete bodies anymore. They're all like separated and everything. And to me, that sort of flattening your fully dynamic whole like 3D self into a 2D flattened profile online, that feels very contortionist. I have men here that are the contortionists, and then the dogs around the perimeter, the dog cutouts, are their best friends, basically. So they're in this circus space as performers inside, and the dogs are outside. So first I'll touch on a little bit of what's inside. They're performing here for you as the audience, but you as the audience step into this spotlighted center and become also a performer. Because if you know anything about circus tents or been to a circus or something resembling a circus, it doesn't really make sense for performers to be on the perimeter. That's not usually how this goes. So I'm kind of playing here with this concept of performers being both performer and audience. But at the same time, if you notice, the men don't have heads, they don't have faces or eyes, so they can't look at you as you're doing your performance. They're kind of ignoring you completely because they're too focused on their own contortions. The dogs, on the other hand, they have eyes and they have faces, kind of. They have mouths, and what's happening is that the dogs are simultaneously cute and doing the act of attracting you in to a profile, while also being vicious and doing this sort of like gendered competition. So if any of you have ever been on a dating app, you might know that it's rare to see a profile that doesn't have a dog. Everyone has a dog. I've been told that there are people who will rent their dogs to go on someone's Tinder profile. So to me, the dogs really felt like something important about sort of performing like a circus animal and doing all the work that the men aren't doing because the men are so engaged in their own flat dance. So that's kind of what you see here. The reason that the dogs are on the outside is because of, well, the reason that the dogs are on the outside and that the tent is transparent, and you can see right through the thing, is because in a lot of my research, I was trying to figure out if dating apps make people act this way and perform gender in a certain way, perform their identities in a certain way because of being dating apps, or if it's just a weird space to view how people normally just act in society. So I wanted the space inside talking about this performance, and the space outside kind of being, in my version, the real world, to have this kind of fluid connection between both of them, where you can see the whole work from the outside and you can see the whole world from the inside. The interior works are cut out of canvas drop cloth and then hand painted the red pieces with stripes, and then the rest of it is done with airbrush. The dogs on the exterior are cut out wood and then hand painted with acrylic paint. And then everything else is something. You can kind of identify the rest of it. The last little detail that I'll tell you before I start taking questions is that in my work, it is very important to me that I really don't depict women. There are reasons for that, but mainly in my research, I found that 76% of dating apps are just men. And that means, well, and also 80% of dating apps are just straight. So that means that a like 50% of all apps are just men floating around with no potential match whatsoever. And it's obviously a lot more complex than that, but I kind of landed on this deep investigation of how men reinforce masculinity in a space where other men can't see them, but they're enforcing a masculinity that is traditionally policed by other men who can't see them. So it's this really strange paradox happening. So women just engage with these apps differently, they exist on these apps differently, and so I kind of leave them out of a lot of my research and practice, but they still play a role. They still play this role as prize, as detail, as accessory, as prop, as something to be won, as the men are kind of doing their thing. So I don't know if you noticed, but the scalloping on the outer edge of the entire tent are breasts. So this is an example of how in my work I kind of just splash in a little detail of femininity to show that they're just a detail in the whole equation of the men's contortion.
My practice is primarily based on focusing on personal change. I consider my practice to be a living archive of my own personal memories and feelings. And I've chosen to do that through the lens of the horseshoe crab primarily. So, for a little bit of background, I spent my summers in South Jersey, right on the water. I've been doing that ever since I was a kid. I've grown up there. And now I'm in my early 20s, right? So it's a period of considerable change for me. I'm graduating, I'm getting married, I'm moving out of my childhood home, and I don't particularly like change very much. So it's uncomfortable for me, but it's something that I have to go through. And so with that, I've been trying to find something that I can hold on to amidst all that change. And one thing that's been a constant is something that I've learned to rely on has been memory. Now, the narrator for my memories is sometimes a little bit unreliable, so I do my best to think about why I have those kind of distortions that happen. One of my very fond memories, something that I still do today, is I lay over the docks and I look down at the water, high tide, low tide, and see what's crawling around in the mud. It's always been fascinating to me, and it's something that has remained constant. One of those creatures that is a constant is the horseshoe crab. And once I started to do some more research thinking about the crab specifically, I've learned that there's a lot of parallels between me and the crab, biologically speaking, symbolically. So the horseshoe crab has been around for millennia. It has not changed in its design. However, for the horseshoe crab to grow as an individual, they go through periods of immense change where they molt, they shed their exoskeleton. It's not very comfortable, but they have to do it in order to survive. This piece behind me is titled Fleeting, and it's very much about molting and that period of growth. Now, this wall mural is not painted in mud, although I do sometimes do that. This is just house paint that matches the mud. But the idea here with sedimentary is thinking about how things layer, right? The mud is layers of decomposed organic matter, dirt, silt, things that wash up. And here I'm thinking about layering in terms of how do I develop my work as an artist. If you step into my studio, you will see that there is a mural covering every surface that I could possibly have available to me. So I've created a new mural here, and as you move from left to right, you start to kind of collect some drawings along the way. As I work, I put things over top of murals. I sometimes work with the imagery that is there. This side consists of pretty much every symbol that I've been working with in the past 3 years here at Stony Brook. The horseshoe crab, the outer shell, the interior, blue crabs, squids. Some of these are more abstract because part of my work is very important, that's very important to me, is that my body is involved in the process. So a lot of these are my arm span. I painted this primarily with standard house paint brushes, and a lot with my hands. I will dip my hands into the paint or the mud, smear it around. It becomes kind of a dance or a meditative process. This mural was created intuitively, so I did not have a pre-planned sketch. I did not have a preliminary drawing. It was me coming in, looking at a white wall, and letting something happen. That way my immediate feelings, my immediate energy is all infused into this. These drawings were created in my studio. Some of these are small daily sketches that I try to maintain. Others are more finished works. Each one is different, and all of these symbols have something that connect back to my childhood, or even something now that I've realized I align more strongly with, but it's all based in marine iconography.
I respect your point, but I don't think it's enough to just look at models of fairness. The mining of cobalt is harming people at a deeply personal level. I've seen the health of mothers and their babies suffer directly because of mining. While companies like Compagnie Minière de Musonnois Global may seem to be making strides, we must remember that over half of the world's cobalt supply comes from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where artisanal miners, also known as creuseurs, often face dire health risks. All cobalt sourced from the DRC is tainted by various degrees of abuse, including slavery, child labour, forced labour, debt bondage, human trafficking, hazardous and toxic working conditions, pathetic wages, injury and death, and incalculable environmental harm. That being said, what are actionable steps that are possible for tech companies to pivot towards more ethical mining practices that genuinely prioritise the welfare of these miners and their communities? What solution haven't we tried? And what about the rights of artisanal miners? They're often forgotten. How can we ensure they're included in the solution?
I can't deny your points. It's a hard...
Okay, so I'll stop there. It's about 8 minutes in total if you guys want to come and check it out afterwards. But just a little background, I'm Josie Williams. I'm a creative technologist and digital artist. And my practice primarily involves experimenting with emerging technology, specifically VR and AI. And so this project here is called Eye to Eye. And so I think of it kind of as me trying to work through a moral conflict that I have as a creative technologist, and then thinking about the very real slave apocalyptic conditions that it's mined or sourced from, and trying to think about how I can bring awareness and draw some sort of through line between my practice and how I make a living and how I create art, and while also respecting and bringing awareness to a particular issue of this genocide that's occurring in the Congo. So this in particular is 5 chatbots that I trained to resemble or role play to be a player in the global supply chain. So what we have here is mother / single woman in a mining town, CEO of a tech company, an international policymaker, child laborer, and then a cobalt mining union leader. And so I have them all, the point of this entire project is to place them inside of a think tank, right? So, and then ask them these questions that we, as people or individuals, consumers, think are too complex or too large to actually have a viable solution. So I asked them a question, which is similar to how do we maintain ethics and morality inside of the cobalt mining industry while maintaining the demand for technology in the future. And for anyone who might not know, cobalt is an essential part of every single technology that we probably have in our pockets. It's an essential part specifically of the lithium-ion battery, which is in every single smartphone, tablet, electronic car, like you name it. It's very essential for our modern and global advancements, technological advancements. So thinking about that, because there's a lot of bloodshed that's been happening in the Congo over the course of centuries, but none has been so intrinsically linked to so many people, all of us. We are all become somehow complicit in this genocide that's happening in the Congo. So what do we do, and who do we actually ask to take accountability? So I put some of the 6 players that I narrowed down after some research into conversation, and task them with the goal of coming up with a solution. And the only way that they can move on to the next question is if everyone agrees that this is a viable solution that works for every single one of these players. So that's these 5 things and this kind of thing here. This is actually what's running everything. This is what I ran the AI models and what I ran the think tank on. It's also what's running the audio sound background. So this video in the back here is another separate piece, which I take Google Map screenshots of the largest mines in the Congo, so 5 of the largest mines in the Congo, and compare them. I use this, it's an AI technique called image interpolation, and it basically just turns one photo into another photo. And so I paired the mine images, particularly with the largest tech companies in the world, specifically tech companies that I'm using right now to even make this point. So we have Tesla, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon. And so yeah, the real goal of this project is to kind of bring awareness to what's happening, but also trying to think differently about how we can think of solutions for this. For me in particular, I had a lot of fun thinking about the solutions that the viabilities of the solutions that these models were coming up with. And thinking about how that can actually become generative when we're thinking about how do we cross international policy and what boundaries and borders, how do we kind of collectively address this issue. So, trying to think if there's anything else. Yeah, so I wanted the technology to be very visible, because I feel like in traditional tech shows, we kind of try to hide the technology away. It's like, oh, it's not there. We're kind of having this immersive experience without it. But I wanted it to really highlight, almost make it kind of sculptural about this is what they're talking about. This is what we are all kind of talking about. And so I also wanted to make sure to highlight the kind of messiness that goes on under the hood. So all these cords and these cables and the way that they are kind of all interconnected and intricately necessary in order to perform this entire installation. The piece is called Eye to Eye, but I really wanted to emphasize the fact that they're shrouded in cloth, their faces are covered, they're not actually having an eye-level conversation. And while this conversation is kind of rooted in idealism, right? Like hypothetically, all these players could come into one room and figure it out. But I wanted to note to the actual realistic process that goes on, where people are constantly kind of hiding their intentions, or not necessarily having the best intentions, not truly being upfront about wanting the well-being for the other person or whatnot. So I wanted this kind of, that kind of conflict to be visually present.
So I think my story as an artist is a little bit different. So I decided to become an artist on August 19th, 2018, around midnight. Here's the story. So I was taking a summer class, which is only 6 weeks long. And I was experimenting with painting on clear plastic, very much like the work that's showing over there. I had a lot of failures. I got really frustrated, and August 19th, 2018 was the Monday of the last week of class, and I was in the studio looking at my materials, looking at my surface, and I realized I only have enough materials to make one more piece. And I mixed my colors, I prepared my surface, I looked at it, I was like, okay, this is it. If it does not work, it does not work. It is what it is. And the next moment, I realized my hands was just like doing it by itself. It was almost possessed by a higher power or something. And before I even realized what's going on, the piece was done and everything was perfect. That was actually that piece over there, which is, as you can see, very similar to the work that I'm showing right now. And even on this very first successful attempt on at doing this kind of experimental technique, you can see there's like shiny part, matte part, transparent, translucent, opaque part, different types of textures. They're all there. This is all I ever hoped for in my work, ever. And at that moment, I just decided, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life because it is such a beautiful, beautiful feeling, and I want to just experience it again and again and again. So that was the story. So a little bit background story about myself. I grew up in China with a kind of traditional family in a not so big of a city, where contemporary art is really not a thing people talk about. I've never been to art shows like the first 26 years of my life. I look for that perfect moment where myself and the world would become one. That moment of unity, that perfect moment. It does not matter what materials I'm using, it does not matter what mediums, what techniques. It is simply about that moment, the moment of unity, the mystery of creation. And I have been experimenting with a lot of different techniques, materials, because I also do have a science background. I kind of utilize a kind of scientific method in my research. When I am approaching some kind of new experimental techniques, I learn the physical and chemical properties of my materials and really get to know them. And not only know them on a material level, but also on a spiritual level. There is always this looking through a glass, looking through a mirror, looking through something, this kind of mediation, this kind of layers. And a lot of times, no matter how hard you try to communicate, it's always for others, it's outside looking in. That's also why I decided to install my work way up there, so you can only look up or look through the window from a distance. Because all of those perfect moments, they're dear to me, they're important to me, but at the same time, once the work is done, their job is done. I already had my moment with them, and anything else is just going to be, outside looking in, unfortunately. And the other piece, which is the tapestries installed on the back wall over there, it is a piece titled Once Upon a Forest Dark. It is my personal interpretation of music. It is actually this album shown over here. It's called Allam by Imperium. I kind of transcribe the time of each track in this album into length. So that's why each panel has a different size. So the width of each panel directly related to the length of the music in the album. And the lines are the kind of general motion in that track, and the color scheme is about the mood of a particular piece. And I work with music a lot. It is a very important part of my work, but at the same time, I think music is always something that's in the background. It is not it sets the mood. It's very important, but at the same time, they don't scream for attention. You can just, have them and be okay with it. So that's why I decided, to install it in the back wall as a background.